Hey, welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. I'm your host, JR, and got a lot to talk about going on in the Big Ten. We have some NFL Combine winners and losers to get to here at the end of the episode. But before we do that, we do have some standard news, notes, stuff like that we're going to get into. And I just know Zach has so many opinions on all of them. Zach, we haven't seen you since Tuesday. Actually, I haven't really seen me since Tuesday either because I was on a work conference and my wife was sick and I was falling asleep at like 9 o'clock pretty much every night. So, you rested? You good to be here,
I
Zach?
am. Well, I was gonna say I wasn't even here Tuesday because
Oh, that's right.
I was realizing. Well, I was like, you got Juck. You don't need me. You had Juck. So, but okay. Speaking of general news and notes, I every once in a while peruse the World Wrestling Entertainment, and which we've talked about having a coaches list of who would win a wrestling match or who would win a fight, but
Mm-hmm.
like I think the biggest news out there right now is John Cena became a bad guy last night. I don't know if you've seen like the memes or anything, but like
I gotta be honest, I am not a WWE guy.
that's fine. It's just
If you are, more power to you. Just not me.
I'm just saying it's like I watch once in a great while, and even I knew that like that was a big deal. I was like, wow, John Cena's like a bad guy. This is a thing. So that's all. That's general news and notes. That's what I'm here to provide you right now.
I would say, did he become a bad guy, like, in his old age or what? Like, what?
I think it was like he's a Hollywood sellout now, and then
Oh,
he
okay.
like beat up a pretty boy. So
Okay. I was gonna say, bad guy in your old age is more like, I'm grumpy and not like
yeah,
I'm gonna, destroy the world.
yeah, get off my lawn. No, like
Yeah.
he like aligned himself with The Rock, which he is also old, but like they also are like multi-billionaires. So I
What
think
I'm
it's
hearing
like
here is that WWE is or not sexist, is ageist, where they're just against old people.
yeah, and classist.
Oh
Classist,
yeah.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
multimillionaires, billionaires, trillionaires. They own the world. It's kind of like the Big Ten and the SEC, quite honestly.
Yeah. Very true. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the Big Ten and the SEC,
Mm.
including one coach in the SEC that is just bonkers um, right now. And I can't wait to talk about it. But before we do need to get to our loyal listeners. Billy Tuesday here says, hello, gentlemen. Hello, Billy. Thanks for being here. We appreciate it.
Good to
Um,
good to see you,
uh,
Billy.
Billy, I think you'll like one of my losers from the combine. I was just telling Zach, I feel like I'm going full, Michigan hater at this point, which if I am, it is what it is. I'm not trying to be, but sometimes it just happens. So I get in moods. Philip says the Burt signal is becoming an NCAA rule. Yeah, what'd you think about that, Zach? I didn't put that in the thing. What'd you think of the T becoming an NCAA rule?
So I didn't see that. What
So
happened?
now the T, if they do that before a kickoff, it basically means that not like you forfeit, but you're not doing the kickoff anymore. You'll just accept a touchback and you won't have the kickoff, which is essentially what the coaches were telling the other coaches. So if you remember back when Brett Bielema did the post game, he said, "I didn't do the T as a taunting.
Yeah, it was to signal that
It was
gonna
it
we're
yeah, it
just gonna
was
take the touchback.
right, but Shane Beamer did it, and then they didn't take the touchback. So
Mhm.
now they're saying if you do this, you're
We're
taking the
just
touchback. You do not have an opportunity to fake out the other team, which I feel like that's not talked about enough. Like if a Big Ten coach did that, ESPN would be reminding us every single week. Oh, yeah, yeah, that dirtbag Big Ten coach. Like how
yeah.
terrible is he? You know,
This I mean, I understand why they made that. It's kind of like with Dan Lanning and the 12 men on the field. It's like, oh, it's a loophole. We should probably close the loophole. But yeah, I like Ryan Day got crucified for that, like for pointing that out versus, Shane Beamer
Ryan Day gets
calling it out.
crucified for anything.
That's fair. That's fair.
The dude could say that coffee doesn't need to be $8 at Starbucks, and people would be like, "Ah, oh, you wimp, you're soft."
You have so much money, you can pay that.
Yeah, Yeah, what are you doing? Complain about frappuccinos at Starbucks. Yeah. All right. Well, we've got to the portion of the show where we just kind of go off the rails. So we'll go back.
3 hours tonight. 3. No,
No, it's
can't
not
do
happening. It's not happening. John says, "Hey everybody, hey John, thanks for being here. You're just over at the basketball episode. You and Philip, I appreciate you guys being there. All right, we live for Saturdays. I think this is Mike, our friend Ali Bobboy. This is my main man. Which, by the way, go subscribe to We Live for Saturday. They have a good podcast over there covering the Big Ten. Friends of the show.
We're gonna
plug
be
for them.
We're gonna be on their show in a few
like
months.
in June or something like that.
Yeah, we're excited about that.
Yeah, we'll let you know closer to then. But I guess if you want to put it on your calendar now, sure. June.
Yeah, in June.
I know
Reserve
we're
it.
recording in June. Maybe they're releasing it in like August. Who knows? I'm just kidding. But he says, my main man, Ariante Ursary, that should give you a hint that I'm going to be saying his name later in the show, that I practiced it, dominating the combine. Dude's measurables are off the charts. 5 flat 40 at that size is nuts. You are right. It is nuts. And it is why his name will be mentioned in my winners portion.
Yeah.
So I don't want to give away too much on that.
First round pick.
Yeah.
This is first round pick. Yeah.
Much. You run like that. You weigh that much. Yep. John says CJ West has been killing it at the combine despite him being a 6'1" nose tackle. Man, he ran that 40 under 5. That was amazing.
Yeah, he might
everybody thought he was running, 5'15", 5'20", something like that. Nope. Dude killed it.
I've had to practice that name for tonight.
That one's not as hard.
Whatever. Ariante Ursary. What's hard about that? It's
yeah, right. I'll put the 2 names in front of my 3-year-old and we'll see which one is harder to pronounce. All right. We guys got so many combine. All right. You know what? I will star the combine winners and losers of you guys. You guys mention them as much as you want throughout the show, and then when we do our winners and losers, I'll get back to you guys. How about that at the end? Because you guys got a lot to say. One last one. So we live for Saturday. Says we are pumped to have you on the show in June. LOL. Yes, in June, not August. All right, Zach. Let's get to our first subject here. Iowa. Oh, let me take down the comment there. There we go. Iowa is expected to not have a spring game per Pete Nakos. Now, I did do a little bit of digging, a little bit of research on this because I thought, well, this is rather surprising. I didn't think this would be one of those teams. I could have thought maybe Oregon, maybe Illinois, maybe I don't know. Name your team that has been one of these teams that's kind of concerned about other people seeing them. I figured Michigan would for sure do it, Indiana would for sure do it, but maybe some guys are getting paranoid. No, Pete Nakos says that his sources are telling him that Iowa is actually not expected to have a spring game this year. So I do think there's some discussion about that. Zach, I'll ask your thoughts on just that kind of in general first, and then I want to have a discussion on how many more Big Ten teams are going to cancel spring games. So Zach, give your thoughts on Iowa not expected to not have a spring game per Pete Nakos. Your thoughts?
I'm surprised. I guess I shouldn't be surprised, but I feel like of all the teams and all the coaches that would have a spring game, it would be Iowa, since it's the tradition. It's been Kirk Ferentz's longstanding thing. So I think I'm surprised. It makes more sense that PJ Fleck would do something like this because he's newer. I'm kind of surprised that Ferentz would be okay with this, especially with kind of their commitment to opening things up for the fans. It would have been another opportunity for the Children's Hospital, the wave, all that. So I'm a little surprised by that. But with the way things are shifting in college football, I can't say I'm too surprised. And again, it's not like they're not having spring practices, right? So the spring game is really for the fans. It always has been about the fans. You get a look at the future, but even then, you go through all the spring games of the past. It's like you don't really learn a ton. You get excited about guys who maybe end up being third stringers sometimes. So I don't think it's that big of a surprise. with the way things are going, I'm just surprised that it's Kirk Ferentz who's calling this off.
Yeah, I'm not surprised by another Big Ten team doing it. It just like I had to do a double take when I saw Iowa.
Yeah.
Iowa's not they're not Matt Rhule. Matt Rhule is kind of innovative and trying to do his own thing. And Philip is saying, I blame Matt Rhule. I get it.
Yeah.
Like he's kind of the one out there doing it. And we're actually going to talk about Matt Rhule again here in another segment. But you're right. Just like Iowa, them doing this, it doesn't seem like their style, but it is what it is. So the other question I wanted to get to is, Zach, I'm going to set the over under or the more or less, however you want to put it, at 6.5. More or less than 6.5 Big Ten teams cancel their spring game. So right now we have Ohio State, USC, Nebraska, Iowa, and Minnesota. That's 5. That's 5. Well, expected Iowa. We don't know that for sure yet, but expected/confirmed 5 spring games canceled. Could you see 2 more teams? And if you could, maybe who do you think those 2 more teams might be?
Are we considering Ohio State canceled since they're doing a spring showcase?
Yes.
Okay.
Anything that's not a spring game. You can still do a spring like Ole Miss, they didn't have a spring game. They had their like little showcase thing last year, but I still would say they canceled their spring game.
Yeah, I think it's going to be over. I think there's too many reasons for at least 2 more teams to not do it. Like I think you could see a team like even Northwestern where they have a facilities disadvantage, right? So like I could see them canceling because of that. I could see Michigan canceling. I could see Penn State canceling.
Really, you could see Michigan canceling. I would have said Michigan would be my lock to keep that. Like if everybody else is done with spring games, I could see Michigan. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just curious to know your thought process.
Well, I just think so, and I could be on a limb here. I just think the bigger programs, I think you could make the argument that it's a better use of time to not do it. Now, I think the counterpoint on that for Michigan is you need as many game reps for guys as possible. Especially is Underwood's enrolled, right?
Yeah, he's practicing and everything.
Yeah. So like for him, that for him alone, it could be worth having him have like some sort of a live crowd to play in front of. I think with Penn State, you've got so many seniors. It's like, man, they don't need more game reps.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. I guess I look at, and Sherrone Moore has been talking about like adapt or die, new world of college football. Pete Nakos did an interview with him where he was talking a lot about that. So I guess I could see that. I feel like Sherrone Moore's whole thing with Michigan and kind of what they're, trying to go against Ohio State with, which like more power to you. I love the rivalry aspect of it, is like, well, Ohio State's, they're doing 2-hand touch at their spring game, so we're going to tackle. We're going to go full on out, all on out. Oh, they want to do a spring showcase? Well, we're going to do spring, smack each other around as much as we possibly can. Like, we're going to tackle our quarterbacks in this one. Obviously, they're not actually going to do that. But, like, I could see Sherrone Moore just kind of going the opposite way of Ohio State, trying to continue to instill that toughness and stuff. But at the same time, like you said, it's going to be good for Bryce Underwood, other guys to possibly continue growing and have that kind of stuff. So I guess what's your final answer, under or over?
I'll say over. And just to be clear, I'm not saying I would pick Michigan. I think there is a realistic argument for honestly any team in the Big Ten to say, let's take this off the table.
Yeah, I agree. Pitt Snipe Husker says the spring game is for kids and young parents who can't afford regular season tickets. Listen,
that's underrated comment right there.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote an entire article about it for Scarlet and Game, which I don't know if I say that enough on here. I write articles for scarletandgame.com if you guys ever want to go listen to them. They're all mostly Ohio State, but if you ever want to go read stuff, I do put out articles like this one where it was really just about the sadness of losing spring games, because as me, who somebody doesn't live close to Ohio State, I can't make it back all the time to go see games, especially with my kids. And so for me, going to a little bit more chill environment, I got to bring my kids last year. It was great. I could afford a regular game, but I can't always work it out with my job and the way things go for me to be able to bring my kids and then take them back home that weekend and everything else. So I was able to do that for a spring game. And you're exactly right. Like I don't remember anything that happened on the field in Ohio State spring. I remember Emeka Ibuka's catch. That's it. I remember about everything I saw my kids do. I remember about everything I, did with my brother and his wife and everything else. So yeah, you're exactly right. Pit Snipe Huckster. All right. We don't need to get mushy. Here we go. Because I'm not ready to get mushy yet, Zach, because we have an absolutely fantastic comment from Kalen DeBoer, who just wants things to be fair again. Zach, he just wants things to be fair again. He said to Pete Nakos, having a more balanced playing field helps our situation. It allows us to get where it was at one point just a few years back. There's a completely balanced playing field a few years back, Zach. I don't know if you know that. Where recruiting is real recruiting and not just someone who's gonna put it in the highest bid. It was real recruiting back then, Zach. That was just precious time back then when it was real recruiting. Everything was balanced. And okay, I got it. Kalen DeBoer, you idiot. This is not. Alabama was never on a fair, balanced field. Okay? It was never, just, whoever wanted to go to the best tradition. Alabama was always the highest bidder because Alabama was chief among them in the SEC. Now, it was not out in the open like it is for Tennessee and how they got punished and everything else. But this stupid comment and this whole idea that since the NIL, Zach, you and I talked about this exact thing happening. Where the northern schools, especially the Big Ten, but essentially the northern schools would have more money and they would be able to outbid a lot of these southern teams. And it's happening in front of us right now, and the SEC is not happy about it. But the thing that gets me the most, if I heard Kirby Smart say this, okay, the guys drank the SEC Kool-Aid for so long, it is what it is. Kalen DeBoer a year and a few months ago was in the Pac-12, going into the Big Ten. Like this guy, You're going to tell me 3 years ago when you were at Washington, well, actually, I don't think it was at Washington. I think it was at Fresno State 3 years ago. You were going to say that it was a fair playing field for you to recruit against Alabama? It wasn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't, dude. And now you're drinking the SEC Kool-Aid saying oh, poor us, Alabama. If only everybody was righteous and paying the same dollar amount. Shut your mouth. That is ridiculous. Zach, save me before I say something that I'll
Get back from the ledge.
I'm about to jump.
When he says revenue sharing, I'm assuming he means nationally and not just in the conference, right? When he's talking about revenue sharing?
Yeah, I believe so. Yes.
Okay, so not SEC.
You're right, Sonny. You're right. I am extra spicy. Well, this story I'm extra spicy. I'm really pretty mild the rest of the night, but go ahead. Sorry, Zach.
Yeah, so he's not entirely wrong with his point. Now, there's context to that. I also think I'm curious what Kalen DeBoer was thinking when he walked into Alabama, what he had heard. Because in a lot of ways, I feel like Kalen DeBoer has shot himself in the foot, which doesn't mean that Kalen DeBoer can't make Alabama better. I think he's a really good coach. But I think he might have been under the impression that he was walking into the same Alabama job that Nick Saban had, which, first of all, Nick Saban's the greatest coach of all time. Second, Nick Saban got out because he no longer had the same advantages that he had 3 years ago. And so it's Kalen DeBoer is going into Alabama thinking, we have all these advantages. And he gets there and it's I thought I had a Ferrari and I've got a Ford Focus. What just happened? And so I'm going to give him a little bit of benefit of the doubt because I think he was expecting a Ferrari, and he got there and he's like, General Motors isn't luxury. This isn't a sports car. What are we doing? And so
Who
I'll
gave me
give him
this
that.
Honda?
Right.
Who gave me this Honda?
Hey, don't knock Hondas, okay? Hondas are
No, they are
great,
reliable.
great
and they
vehicles.
are good vehicles. But
yes. But all that being said, I think so. That's my Kalen DeBoer piece. Let me go to the SEC because it's all these SEC whiners. You know, someone mentioned, was it Lane Kiffin who said it? I'm kind of shocked it wasn't, because that dude, like, he sticks his foot in his mouth more than anybody. This is absurd. Like, the SEC had a not so secret agreement to pay the highest bidder. And Big Ten coaches, again, would be like, we know how it is in the SEC. And people be like, you guys just complain all the time. It just means more in the SEC. It's like, no, like, they're paying guys under the table, right? It's like the worst kept secret in the world. Cam Newton, anybody? Come on. And now all of a sudden it's fair. And to your point, like we've been saying, Northern programs on the whole have more money, period. And now the SEC is getting their butt kicked and they're starting to put their tail between their legs. That's what's happening. And so this comment, like by Kalen DeBoer, I can feel sympathetic for him because he hasn't been in the SEC for a while. And actually, if it was Kirby Smart saying it, I'd be like, dude, shut up. First off, get your players.
But it would make more sense, right? If Kirby Smart said it would make more sense.
Yes, but I'd have far less sympathy. I actually have
sure.
more. I have more sympathy for Kalen DeBoer. But
You're
also,
the sympathetic one here. I'm not sympathetic.
I'm sympathetic to him, like thinking he was going to get a Ferrari. I'm not sympathetic for him thinking that he would win a national championship at Alabama when he was about to enter the Big Ten with a team that was just in the national championship game. So, like, yeah, I'm sympathetic, but I'm not sympathetic.
I hear you. Do want to say really fast. Paul says hi, and he says, you guys are great. Glad I found this show. Paul,
hey, Paul.
Glad to have you here. And look at that. Right off the bat, he said Zack knows. So, Paul, thanks for being here. We're glad you found the channel. We always want to welcome new viewers, and so we appreciate it. So I think people like it when we talk badly about the SEC. I think overall that's a positive for our channel.
I think so. It's great.
Because if we ever do an episode where we don't talk badly about them, people are like, "What's wrong with these guys? Like, are these guys okay?" So
we didn't take the antidote of confidence. That's what happened.
Oh, look at this. Ryan chiming in. He says, Bear Bryant is the GOAT. Now, I won't argue much with that. Bear Bryant, incredible. One of the most successful head coaches, if not the most successful head coach in college football history. If he's not the GOAT, he's in the conversation to be the GOAT at the very least. So, Ryan, I will give credit where credit is due with the SEC, just like I've done this season with SEC basketball. I've not said it very often because I don't like to say it, but they are the best conference this year in basketball. And I will give them credit when they have great coaches. And I said it about Nick Saban. Nick Saban was a great coach. Nick Saban did a great job. May have paid some players under the table a little bit, but you know what? He still got those players and did a great job with them.
Yep.
Kalen DeBoer, it might just be me, Zach, but I think Kalen DeBoer is the biggest op coach of the Big Ten, in my opinion. Like, because he was a Pac-12 head coach who was supposed to come into the Big Ten, people still talk about Washington. Like I do. Like, current Big Ten teams have been undefeated versus the SEC's current teams. Like, that was Washington versus Texas, right? Steve Sarkisian still with Texas. Kalen DeBoer bolted for the SEC. Now, albeit SEC King program, but still, he bolted for the SEC, and now he's drinking that SEC Kool-Aid so much that he's like, oh yeah, if only things were more fair like they were years ago. And I get he's probably talking more about, college football in general and less about the actual Alabama. But you know what? every single person attaches everything Ryan Day says to exactly his situation at Ohio State, and every single person attaches everything, Steve Sarkisian says to everything he says at Texas and everything else. Like all of those teams or all of those people do that about those coaches. And I do think Kalen DeBoer needs to learn you aren't talking like Washington's head coach anymore. You aren't talking like Indiana's offensive coordinator. You aren't talking as Fresno State's head coach anymore. You are talking as the head coach of Alabama. So when you say, when things were more fair 3 years ago, a few years ago, people are looking at what that Alabama program was a few years ago. And it's just, you got to learn. I don't know. Am I off base? Do you think he is the biggest coach op of the Big Ten right now?
So Lane Kiffin still exists. Brian Kelly still exists.
Kiffin was never a Big Ten head coach. He was at USC, but he got fired at USC, right?
So you're saying he's the least liked because he was in the Big Ten?
Yes. Well, he wasn't in the Big Ten.
I was going to say, he wasn't in the Big Ten, though.
But he was supposed to come in the Big Ten. He betrayed us.
Yeah. Well,
Judas.
But okay,
not exactly, but still.
Alabama. So, to be fair, Washington had made 2 playoffs in the past 20 years, and Alabama had made the play. They won 6 national championships in a 14-year period, and so I can understand the appeal. I wish he would have had hindsight into realizing maybe that was more Nick Saban than it was Alabama. I think Alabama's a great program. That's not me saying that Alabama can't be
I said it about Alabama. I've been telling people in the 21st century, Ohio State is the best program. Now, I'm probably biased. That's fine. But if you look at programs overall, a program is more than just one coach. LSU is the only other program that has rivaled the success, coach in, coach out. And you could say LSU has done it with worse coaches, and I would believe you there. Les Miles, Ed Orgeron. What a group Brian Kelly has put himself in. But Brian Kelly's a better coach than those two, and he hasn't won jack. He hasn't won jack. So, he beat Alabama. I literally heard somebody say on Twitter today. I didn't hear him say. I read somebody say on Twitter today that Brian Kelly is a top 10 coach because he beat Alabama in his first year.
What are we doing?
What
are we doing?
It was kind of crazy when Texas got ranked for losing to Nick Saban. That was pretty crazy. But I don't know. Top 10 coach because you have one win. I don't know. Seems crazy.
Yeah. Well, and Alabama hasn't been great the past couple of years either.
They won. Yeah, they won the national championship in 2020, and that was a great team. That was fantastic. But really, since then, they beat Georgia in the SEC title game.
The 2021 team was really good, and I think they would have won the national championship if Mechie and Jamison Williams doesn't go down.
Yeah.
And that defense, that 2021 Georgia defense was maybe the best defense, I don't know, in my lifetime.
Yeah, that was absurd.
Stacked.
That's why the Eagles won. That's why the Eagles won the Super Bowl this year, because of the Georgia 2021 defense.
Yeah, they're so good that they won the Super Bowl. Not the national championship. They won that too, but they won the Super Bowl.
Yeah, pretty much.
I'll just say that I'll finish this out by saying this, because I can understand your point. I actually might make a bigger argument for Brian Kelly. Not that he left a Big Ten program, but he left Notre Dame, which is a Midwest staple, and was I can't win here.
Yeah, and he said he did so while bashing them out the door.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's between those two.
You don't think Kirby...
Kiffin and Shane Beamer are up there as well.
You don't think Kirby's up there with the amount that he complained this year?
Yeah, he's up there as well. I think I think the betrayal aspect does a lot, though.
Yeah,
right? Kirby
fair.
never betrayed anybody in the Big Ten. He just singing his SEC homer, Christmas carols.
Yeah. It's interesting. Washington, I feel like Washington fans don't see DeBoer leaving as a betrayal as much. I'd be curious to talk to Hooligan about this.
Yeah, you should write that down. Ask about that on your next
Next
State of the
show.
Program
Yeah.
episode.
Yeah.
So, all right, we do need to move on though. Ryan does want to clarify. I'm a Wisconsin fan. Yes, Ryan. We appreciate you clarifying that. I did remember that. I hope I didn't make you sound like an Alabama fan there.
Yeah. And we appreciate the 2, by the way. Thank you.
Yes, we appreciate the $2. Thank you. All right. Let's get to our last segment, and then we'll do the NFL stuff after that. Big Ten and SEC coaches use non-conference games to justify automatic qualifier bids. All right, so the first one in this entire saga was Matt Rhule, right? Nebraska cancels the game with Tennessee, and the AD comes out, talks about it. It's for financial reasons and all this stuff, and I do think there was some to that. But then essentially Matt Rhule comes out and he says, why would we play 10 Power 4 conference teams or Power 2 conference teams? Why would we play 9 conference games and then an additional SEC team when the SEC teams are only playing 8 and essentially an ACC team? He doesn't go that far into the details, but he essentially says, why would we play 9 conference games and an additional opponent from a power conference while the SEC is playing 8 conference games and only one additional, like 9 and 10 are not even, which I agreed with. I think it stinks. I want to see more good out of conference games. You and I did an entire segment on how a Big Ten SEC battle would be awesome. But until the SEC gets to 9 conference games, I agree with Matt Rhule. Like, why play it?
Yep.
I don't want that to happen, but I agree. Then Sherrone Moore, Steve Sarkisian, who said it first? I don't know. They said it around the same time, so I'll just say Sherrone Moore first. Sherrone Moore comes out, and he's talking about how great the Big Ten is and how 9 conference games in the Big Ten doesn't get enough credit for how good it is. And he's talking about how we're the best conference out there. And then Steve Sarkisian starts talking about the Ohio State-Texas game, right? It's Texas, who was just talking all big and bad about how we'll play anybody. We'll go out there and play anybody. Steve Sarkisian comes out and he says, well, I just hope whoever the loser is of this game doesn't get punished.
Yeah.
Which I agree with, but I also found funny after the Texas AD was talking about we don't want to be punished. Or we will play anybody. But yep. Zach, my whole thought process here, like, will the automatic qualifiers kind of get rid of some of this stuff, the fear of playing teams out of conference? Like, is this a positive that maybe some people aren't seeing? What's your thoughts here?
I hate to be the pessimistic one. No, it won't help. Because I think at the end of the day, you're looking at budgets, which means you need to guarantee more home games to fill up your stands, to fill out your athletic budget. So I think that's going to be a big deal. I think the other thing is that there's always an excuse to get out of some of these high-profile games. And so right now it's, well, why would we if it's going to hinder our playoff chances? But then I think after that, it's, well, but what about the wear and tear in the playoff? And like we've already seen people talk about that. Like Ryan Day talked about that, not about canceling games, but he talked about how hard it was to get his guys ready. It's why they're doing a spring showcase. It's why it's why a lot of guys didn't run the 40 at the combine and didn't do a lot of athletic stuff and it's saving for the pro day because they played a 16-game schedule. And so do you want to add, and I'm not talking as a fan right now, I'm talking as an athletic director, as a coach, do you want to add a top 5 team in the country to your 9-game conference schedule, even if you have an automatic qualifier? Well, maybe if it helps you develop, but probably not, because you're going to have to play those same caliber teams down the road if you want to make the playoff. So I just don't know if that the fan in me hopes that I'm wrong, but I think the more I think the more they take a look at this system, especially if they expand again, it's going to be 14 or 16 teams before you know it. I think there's going to be another couple of outs to justify not having as many non-conference games. I hope I'm wrong though.
Yeah. So the Penn State guy is getting exactly where I was going to go next. He says James Franklin personally told me every Big Ten AD voted to go to 8 conference games, but the Big Ten refused because of the money. He goes on to say the SEC does what's best. The Big Ten goes for money. That's why SEC 8 in the Big Ten 9 conference games. This is exactly what I was going to go to, where it doesn't matter what these coaches are saying behind the scenes. What matters is what the TV companies want, right? Like, it doesn't matter if Steve Sarkisian in Texas gets, punished for a non-conference game. It doesn't matter if Matt Rhule wants to play that game or not. It doesn't matter if Sherrone Moore says we're the best conference and everybody, should play non-conference games. That doesn't matter. What matters is the TV companies. And until Fox and ESPN get together and say, hey, let's have the Big Ten and the SEC play each other once a year in the out of conference and tell them they have to do it, it's probably not going to happen. So in this scenario, it's actually the Big Ten or the TV companies that we all hate so much because all they want is the money that we're actually rooting for in this scenario to say, hey, work together and get us a Big Ten SEC challenge. Now, I don't know how all the financials work out in that. I'm pretty sure the way they do is the home team is the one that kind of gets the financials for, because that would be who broadcasts the game, Fox, CBS, NBC, that kind of stuff. But as far as I'm concerned, like, I totally agree with everything you said, Zach. Like, all that stuff matters and should be taken into account. But all of these conferences, doesn't matter how big and bad the Big Ten is, doesn't matter how big and bad the SEC is, they all take marching orders from the TV companies. And until ESPN gets hard with the SEC and says you got to play non-conference games, they're not going to it.
Yeah.
And I agree, it probably is smarter to do 8 because you have less wear and tear on your teams, get them better prepared for the playoffs. But as far as I'm concerned, I just want them even. If that means the Big Ten goes to 8, so be it. If that means the SEC goes to 9, so be it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Your response in just a second, Zach, because Blue Wolverine just came in and gifted 10 Big Ten Huddle podcast memberships, and Blue Wolverine, we greatly appreciate that. Thank you so much. I see you do that for our show. I see you do that for so many shows. You are just like a little angel that goes all around the Big Ten, or not the Big Ten, all over YouTube and just does gives memberships, the super chats, everything else, and you're awesome. So thank you so much, Blue Wolverine. You're awesome. You're my favorite Michigan fan. Tied with Yankee.
I was gonna say you and Yankee are tied. We appreciate you guys, and that's a good reminder too that if you want to be a member, make sure you sign up once a month. We do call-in shows with our members, releasing members-only content. So definitely check out the memberships. We would love to have you guys be a part of the members. Blue Wolverine, thank you for being Santa Claus. We appreciate it.
With the W, Santa Claus. I love it. Thank you, Blue Wolverine. You and Doreen both coming into the chats and all that stuff. We greatly appreciate it. Philip does say Big Ten drops to 8 and play the Big Ten versus SEC challenge. I think the change is extremely valuable to sort out teams. I think it would be as well, especially if you do it the right way with maybe 8 last year plays 8 this year, that kind of stuff. There probably does need to be some figuring out like what's going to happen with the, when you and I did it, we just skipped 2 teams, each of us. Would the SEC ever go to 18 teams and even that out? That'd be interesting. But I didn't get your thoughts on what I said. Thoughts on what I said, and then we'll move on to NFL stuff.
I was just going to say, I would love it. Like, I think what you're saying is ideal, like that the TV companies actually kind of force their hand. Not that I typically like that, but here, my dream would be they can own the Big Ten SEC challenge and give up the ownership rights to the playoff. Because I don't think a TV company should own a playoff. That's the thing that annoys the crap out of me. And there's too much opportunity for tampering, too much opportunity for what's the word I'm looking for?
Insider trading.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to think of the right word. Like corruption. There's too much opportunity for corruption. Like, but if they own the rights to the Big Ten SEC Challenge, yes, there's still opportunity for corruption. But one game that's not determining the national champion is different than owning an entire playoff where you get to dictate who gets in. And I don't care what anybody says. Those TV companies absolutely care about who gets into their playoff.
Philip says, JR, are you going to say that's a cuss word, Philip? And I don't cuss. I did say damn on the last show, but that's not as bad as that one. I'm just kidding.
I think both of us have come a little close. And I don't curse either, but I think both of us have gotten fiery enough where we've come close tonight. So
yeah, there we go. You've got spicy JR and spicy Zack getting close. So I did almost say it one time because Yankee, I think, gave us a super chat, and I was like, no, I have to withhold. So it is what it is. But, all right, everybody, we're gonna hit a commercial, and then we'll come back. We'll give our winners and losers of Big Ten players in the NFL Combine. So, well, I guess it's over now. So far, overall. So we'll be right back. Have you ever wanted to watch all 22 film, that film the coaches watch? Well, now you can. Introducing the Coaches Film Room. Over at Minutes to Sports, former college coach Zach Smith breaks down film of the most relevant teams in college football with a bit of a Big Ten lead. It's not free, so you'll need to sign up for the Colonel tier, which is $25 a month, but I can attest to you that it is far more worth it than that. With about 4 to 8 games per week, this is worth so much more money, not to mention Zach's analysis, making you a smarter football fan. Go check it out. The links are in the description, minutestosports.com. You won't be sorry. Back here on the Big Ten Huddle, we appreciate you being with us. Please do like, subscribe, do all that stuff. And yeah, it helps us out. John says, I bet you guys cussed a lot after the Ohio State lost to Michigan. John, why do you have to bring that up? Why do you have to bring it up? Is it because Blue Wolverine's here and he's such a great guy? You wanted to get on his good side?
Was there a football game on November 30th? I don't remember anything.
Yeah, I blocked that date out. I don't know what happened. It's all a mystery. Everybody in the media talks about this November 30th game. Like, nobody wants to talk about what it was. I don't remember where I was.
I remember December 21st. I remember January 1st. I remember January 10th. And I remember January 20th or 21st. Yeah. Those were football games, right?
Yeah. John, you got it exactly right. I just remember that national championship run.
There we go.
All right. All right, Zach, Big Ten NFL Combine winners and losers. So we tried to do our best here, I will admit, to try and give like a good amount of attention to every team. So if you think like, oh wow, these guys only had like 1 or 2 Ohio State winners or 1 or 2 Oregon winners or something like that, doesn't mean like if we didn't list somebody as a winner, it doesn't mean we didn't think they did a good job. It just means that we're trying to put on a good show and, kind of give every team a little bit of credit. We didn't force ourselves to give every team credit, but if Zach picks an Oregon guy, I'm going to try to pick, a Maryland guy or something like that. And yes, I know I have a Maryland guy on my list. I know that's going to be crazy to some of you, but I've never denied that Maryland has talent. I've just said they haven't had a coach. So with that, Zach, give us your first winner.
I said we've always said Maryland has had talent. That's why we crucify their coach.
Yes.
My first winner is CJ West. Very hard name to say. CJ West. Very hard. Okay.
You practiced really hard for that one.
I did. But I think he did such a great job. Ran a sub 540 dash. Weighs over 300 pounds doing it. I think it was big for him, especially because he's coming from Indiana. And despite the fact that I think he's put some really good film out there and I think had a really good season, I still think at times you are judged more by your helmet than by your film. And I think this helps blow that out of the water. And so I think that helps raise his stock. I think it validates his film, and I think he's really secured himself a higher in the higher rounds for the NFL draft.
Yeah, I like that pick. CJ West, I mean, we mentioned it kind of at the beginning. He was picked to go, over 5.15, 5.2 or something like that in the 40. I don't know exactly how much the 40 matters. Like it is probably the one that gets the most attention. I don't know how much it matters for defensive tackles all that much, but I do know that if you combine that with burst to be able to jump, the vertical, the broad jump, all that stuff, it does go together. And for me, like you saw that. You saw that in CJ West, not just with the 40, but in other areas as well. So yeah, huge winner for him. Yeah, we'll see where he goes in the draft. My first winner, and I teased it earlier, is Ariante Ursary, the offensive tackle out of Minnesota. Zach, did you know that Minnesota has had a streak of players being drafted in the first or second round of the NFL draft for 5 years straight?
Started with Antoine Winfield, right?
Yes. Yep. And we're about to make it 6 years straight because Ariante Ursary is going in the first round after the camp performance or the combine performance that he put on. A 5.01 40-yard dash at over 330 pounds is absolutely insane. The dude has perfect height for a tackle. I think a lot of people were looking at him as possibly a guard in the NFL. They were saying like, oh, does he really have the athleticism to scoot outside? Yes, he does. And his broad jump, in addition to that, ranked in the 89th percentile as well. That's incredible. Like Penn State guy is saying right here, the broad jump is the number one drill that translates to explosion. Yeah, you saw the explosive lower body of Ariante Ursary, not just in the 40, but in that broad jump as well. So a guy being able to jump as far as he could at 330 plus pounds. Again, 330 plus pounds. I cannot say that enough. It's just absolutely spectacular. Any team is out there. It does not matter what Ariante Ursary's technique is and all that kind of stuff. A team out there is going to look at all of these athleticism scores and everything else and say, yeah, we'll take him in the first round, possibly early second round. Just kind of depends on needs and stuff, and he'll go for them. So it'll be fantastic. So, and yeah, Billy says, I'm not sure how important it is for an O-line to run a 40. Yeah, it's just the explosion more than anything else. You know, how kind of quickly out of the gate can they get and stuff like that. There's a variety of things they look at with the 40. But overall, that paired with the broad jump. I think if the broad jump wasn't good, maybe you'd say, oh, okay, that's good, but what does it really mean? That paired with the broad jump was fantastic for Ursary. So,
yeah. Very good.
All right. Who's your other winner, Zach?
Yeah. So I've got another Minnesota guy in Ja Joyner who I thought did really well. Again, I don't think anyone was going into this thinking that, oh, this guy is going to be a bona fide starter. But I think he needed a good combine to solidify being a mid-round, day 3 or maybe early day 3 pick. And I think he did that. I think he had a really good 40 time, 4.6 in the 40. He's going to be more of a speed rusher, I think, at the next level. Had good, not great, not elite measurables in the 3-cone and 20-yard shuttle, but like really good. And I think that's going to help him really solidify him as a middle round pick. And I think, again, you don't expect Minnesota, unless you're Ursary, you don't expect necessarily Minnesota guys to be high level guys. And I think this just helps solidify his draft stock so that they're not just scouting the helmet, but his film and his measurables.
Yeah. Ja Joyner, he did have a great job there. I think there was something with his measurables that was maybe it was his arm length or something like that, but
34 inches.
Okay. But there with all these defensive linemen and stuff like that, it seems like everybody's going to get dinged for something like that because this draft doesn't seem to have the outstanding measurables that maybe we've seen in the past. And I think a lot of these teams, they don't draft based off only measurables. It's kind of like, what do you do with those measurables? Not just in your playing, but also in your 40 time, your broad jump, your vertical jump, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah. All right, my second one, and I will be honest, I did not practice this name as hard as Carson Schwessinger, the linebacker out of UCLA. I felt like he was pretty underlooked or appreciated in the Big Ten. Maybe that's part of us as our fault, Zach, but he had a really good year. Linebacker for UCLA. He was a 2024 Butkus Award finalist. So he had a really good year last year, got that recognition. He came in with a 39.5 vertical jump. I see a lot of people putting the negatives like Caleb Johnson and stuff like that in the chat. We will get to the losers here soon. Don't worry. But I really like Schwessinger, what he did for himself here. On top of the vertical jump, what he was able to do with his other testing, his athleticism score was up near an 80 for a guy like Schwessinger. That was some of the bigger concern for him was, does he have the athleticism to play linebacker in the NFL that he needs? He's answered a lot of those questions. I don't think he's going to be like a first or a second round pick or anything like that, but he's going to be one of the higher taken linebackers. He had the second highest vertical of any linebacker at the combine. So overall, I just think he really helped himself out a lot. 10th best mark in his position group with the athleticism score, second highest athleticism score among, or second highest next gen. What's that called? I have it in my
next gen
production score.
Production score.
His production score was 81. That was the second highest of linebackers. So I just think he did a really good job for himself. Felt like he capitalized off a big year this year. And he should get drafted pretty high. It would be good for him.
Nice. Third, I have Quinshon Judkins of Ohio State. And I thought I could have gone with either running back here, but I actually lean a bit more towards Judkins because I think while he had the slower 40, I think you look at the jumps and you're like, oh man, he is going to be really explosive. And I think his 40 actually combined with his explosion really helps him because I think a lot of people were expecting him to run more in the 4.5s or even 4.6s, but he had a sub 4.5 40 and had an 11-foot broad jump. You look at then how that mixes into the score breakdown on next gen stats. He was second overall in athleticism score. That's a big deal with some of the guys that you have in there. Guys like Travion, guys like Amarian Hampton and Ashton Genty. His total score out of all the running backs was fifth. So and of course, his production score was always going to be limited because he shared the backfield with Travion Henderson. So I thought he really acquitted himself well. And I think he got maligned a bit, especially in the second half of the season for Ohio State. But I think he showed up in the combine, and I think that's going to help him. Second round, maybe sneaks. And I think both he and Travion could sneak into the first round at the tail end. I wouldn't bet on it, but I think both of those guys could sneak into the first round with their combine.
Yeah, I don't think both of them are going to get in the first round. I think it would probably be like a one or the other type of deal. That just feels like too many running backs, especially with Amarion Hampton did and stuff like that. But yeah, I could definitely see one of them getting in there. I think somebody might, just gamble on that upside with Travion Henderson, but at the same time, like I can see the New England Patriots just wanting to go after a guy like Quinshon Judkins, and what Derrick Henry was for. I'm not saying Quinshon Judkins is Derrick Henry or anything like that. I'm just saying like Mike Vrabel had Derrick Henry basically his entire time in Tennessee, and how valuable that was for him. Like, does he go high in the draft to get kind of that staple running back? I don't think it'd be the best move in the world because running backs aren't durable enough, but you could maybe see it happen. So, All right. Good stuff there. I would have said Quinshon Judkins if you didn't. So my next one, I'm going to go with Ty Felton, Maryland. Ty Felton did a really good job for himself. Now, he does not have the best measurables in the world. His arm is only 30. It's not fantastic. His wingspan isn't fantastic. Like, that's in like the 11th percentile. He doesn't weigh, quite as much as you'd want for an X receiver. Only 183, I think, is what he weighed in at. So it's not like the best in the world for the measurables, but when you look at everything else, like, we'll get to a guy in a minute who didn't have the best measurables and didn't perform well in the combine. Like, Ty Felton made up for all of that with what he did in the combine. He ranked in the 90th or higher percentile for his 40, his vertical, his broad jump, and his 10 yards. Or his 10 yards was 85 percentile. I apologize. Yeah. But still, all of the athleticism, everything else, his running, his jumping, everything else, it's fantastic. It shows why he was the beast that he was at Maryland. Eventually, teams caught on and they just started going crazy covering him. So that was hard for him. But early on, the dude was just a monster before anybody caught on. And it looks like if teams don't trigger in on him, he could be a monster in the NFL as well. Now, he needs to get his weight up. He needs to, overcome some of those hand-arm measurable type of stuff, but the dude's an athletic freak, and he showed it. And with how many wide receivers had a great time, like that, like, to me, I almost considered making Pat Bryant a loser, not because Pat Bryant did anything wrong, but just because there were so many wide receivers out there that caught, people's eyes, like Shamir Dyke from Florida. Nobody would have had him pegged as somebody to be drafted over Pat Bryant. But after he ran the 40 that he did, I wouldn't be surprised to see a team reach up and take him over Pat Bryant. Now, I think that's stupid. I think Pat Bryant's, the better prospect overall. But, these teams fall in love with 40 times. So I think 40 times are good. Like I said, if you pair them with other athletic scores to show that this guy isn't just a track athlete. Like, there are other aspects to his game as well. Yeah. And I think Ty Felton showed that.
Yeah. Felton scored well where he needed to. Like, he's not a big bodied receiver, so you don't need to have the big wing. Like, you don't expect him to have the big wingspan. He's a speed guy, and so I think you're right on point with him.
Yeah. Sub 4.4 was what he needed to do, and that's what he did.
Yeah. Which, by the way, you mentioned Pat Bryant. That sound that you hear in the background is Illinois fans marching to say, "You're wrong about Pat Bryant."
Well,
he's going to get drafted high.
I said he's a great prospect.
I'm just messing.
I think the NFL teams won't see it. Maybe it's better. Maybe he can turn into Cooper Kupp.
There you go.
Actually, where was Cooper Kupp drafted at? He was drafted pretty.
He was third round.
Third round. Okay. Yeah. Pat Bryant won't go third round. He'll probably go fifth. Maybe sixth round. Maybe fourth. He could go fourth, but probably fifth or sixth. So
yeah, we love our Illini fans up in here.
Yeah, I'm surprised Philip hasn't taken my head off yet.
Yeah, which, by the way, I'm hoping to be talking with Sonny Verma. We're messaging on X. Hopefully, going to talk about kind of the postmortem of Illinois, which tomorrow night, postmortem of Nebraska with TJ Burkle. So make sure you check that out. They need 12 subs, by the way, to get to 1,000. So nice. Get on that. I know. Shameless plug for
you should say the name of the show.
Yeah, Common Fan Podcast. Go there, subscribe, get them over 1,000. My fourth, sorry, I just too many plugs right there. My fourth is Terrence Ferguson, tight end out of Oregon. And I'm trying to get the combine score up. For some reason, I can't get it up. But in the show notes that we have, I think the biggest thing is that in a combine where the tight ends kind of stunk, Terrence Ferguson did not. And I think that's the biggest thing, the biggest takeaway. We've been saying all year that dude's a stud, that he was an underrated tight end in the country, and his measurables showed that out at the combine, whereas all the other tight ends that you kind of expected to do well did not. So that's going to help raise his draft stock just alone, because he actually tested well and his film looks great.
Yeah, for sure. It's a good combine for Terrence Ferguson. John says biggest winners of the tight end group: Tyler Warren, Colson Loveland. Everyone else was mediocre in the group. Terrence Ferguson was not mediocre. I'd put him in that category as well. So
Yeah.
there you go. There's your Big Ten tight end group.
Yeah.
That's where you go if you want a good tight end in the
I'd
NFL.
say
Go find a Big Ten school.
the Big Ten has always been good with tight ends.
Yeah.
Like, go look at most tight ends in the NFL. They're probably from Iowa or Penn State.
Or Penn State.
Yeah.
Or now Michigan.
Yeah, now Michigan. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's true. It's true. All right. Pit Sniper says Fedone performed well. Yeah, I didn't hear anything bad about Fedone. I heard a couple of good things about some of his stuff. But yeah, I think there were other tight ends that kind of, stole the show. But you're exactly right. He needs to stay durable in the NFL if he wants a career there. Which same thing with Trevion Henderson. He needs to stay durable. So. All right, my final winner, and then we'll get into the losers because I know that's what about everybody wants to talk about is the guys that didn't do so well. My final winner is Tyleik Williams, the Ohio State defensive tackle, who is now starting to get buzzed for being the best run stopper in all of the draft. Which, if you're labeled as the best at something after the combine, great news for you, because that's what a lot of these teams are looking for. They're looking for some kind of exceptional trait, something that they can really build a guy's entire game off of. And it looks like NFL teams are starting to think that Tyleik Williams can build his entire game off of this this trait of stopping the run. Now, his weight is over 330, and he ran a 4.68. I just went on and on about how Ariante Ursary was over 330. Tyleik Williams weighs more than Ariante Ursary. That's only a few pounds, but still, he weighs more, and he ran 0.3 seconds less than Ariante Ursary did. That's phenomenal. Now, he doesn't have the longest arms in the world. His arms are about 25th percentile. His height is okay. His hands are 66th percentile. So, all that other stuff checks out. He's going to have to overcome the arm stuff, but as far as I'm concerned, you put this guy in the middle, you put him as a 3-tech. If you can have yourself a good nose tackle combined with him as a 3-tech, going up against a power running team like the Chargers or something like that, you're going to have a lot of success with Tyleik Williams there in the middle. In addition to that, apparently obviously I wasn't there at the combine, but apparently some of the stuff I read was that the combine instructors were having Tyleik Williams go do the drills to show how other people should do the drills. So, I mean, if you got somebody out there like Tyleik Williams that can just go out there and do the drills and that kind of stuff, I mean, teams are going to notice that, and they're going to see leadership. They're going to see that kind of stuff. So I think overall Tyleik Williams helped himself out a lot. So.
Agreed.
All right. Let's see. Zach, should we do our losers?
Yeah.
We should have done SEC losers. We shouldn't have done Big Ten losers.
I mean, we can do it right now. All of them.
Well, but would that make us too big of homers?
Yes.
Okay. Let's do Big Ten losers. Darn.
Okay. I
don't want to be too much of homers.
Yeah. I'll start with another Ohio State lineman. And I just want to preface it. I don't think he's a loser because, I don't think he lost because he's going to fall dramatically, but I do think it's going to stunt his ascent, and it's Jack Sawyer. I think Jack Sawyer had a chance, if he had a really good combine, to continue the momentum from really his epic playoff run. And I think his performance at the combine kind of completely halted it. He just he looked sloppy in the drills. His arms measured, the wingspan wasn't what you thought it would be. His arm length was smaller than you expected. And so I think that's not to say that I think he's going to drop out of day 2, but I think there was maybe a thought that he could really play himself into late round 1. And there's just no way that's going to happen now. I think the momentum that he had has been stalled.
Yeah. I think overall for most Ohio State players, I would say, and Notre Dame players as well, and some playoff teams overall, the combine being at the time that it was kind of forced them to be losers because they had to wait to do stuff at their pro days, right? And Jack Sawyer got out there and tried to do the some of the drills, and he just kept slipping and looked kind of sloppy. And is that because he didn't have as much rest as other guys? Maybe. That could be. We'll see at pro day. Could have just been a bad day. We'll see. But as far as I'm concerned, that is an unintended consequence of playing until January 20th, which is the combine is less than a month and a half away, and you're gonna have to go from playing a national championship game to the combine. It is what it is. No excuse. You still have to be better, but it just is what it is. So, all right, I'll say it. I see other people talking about it. My first loser is Tej Johnson. Now, I will say, I think Tej Johnson's gonna have a future in the NFL. But if we're talking in terms of draft stock and people, what they think about you, I think Tej Johnson's draft stock took a huge hit. I wouldn't be surprised if Tej Johnson goes in the 6th or 7th round after coming in weighing 154 pounds and having a 40 time of plus 4.5. If you're going to be 154 pounds, you gotta be 4.4 or lower. That's that has to be. That's not like, oh, good job, you went 4.4 or lower. That's like, oh, okay, you went 4.4 or lower. Okay, that's where you should be at. 4.5 or more at 154 pounds. It's just, you can't do that. Now, I think, like I said, I think Tej Johnson's going to be good in the NFL. His shuttle time, his 10-yard, his vert, his broad jump, his 3-cone drill, all that stuff was really, really good. Was in the 70th percentile or higher. He has quick feet. He does a great job hand fighting as well. I think it was hand fighting, or no, with his feet. He does a great job moving his feet, taking his steps. He uses his legs in such a way with his route running sometimes. I saw a guy talking about this on a Twitter video where he was kind of pointing out the way he uses his feet in his route running that can be deceptive. So, that's really interesting. But I think Tej Johnson's going to be fine. I think this is just one of those situations where it's like, this kind of sucks, because the player is better than this, but they came to the combine and they didn't have a good score.
Yeah. Well, and I think the biggest knock, it's not even his measurables, it's his weight. Because he's probably going to play the slot quite a bit in the pros. And that means you're going to get hit a lot over the middle. And you have to have some sort of girth to be able to sustain that. I mean, a lot of people are talking about Tank Dell as someone he compares to. Tank Dell's gotten hurt the past couple years, and your best ability is availability. And I think Tej Johnson's great. I think he's a really good player, but I agree with you that I think his 40 time is alarming. But even if he ran a 4.3, 154 pounds is alarming. You don't see a lot of players in the NFL under 175.
And I think, if he was like an early enrollee, 17 years old, and he got to the NFL and he came out as a junior, I don't think it'd be as big of a deal, because I think some people would be like, oh, okay, well, you were young when you got into college. You only spent 3 years in the strength and training program. It is what it is. We'll beef you up. You're only 20, 21 years old. We'll beef you up when you get to the NFL. Tej Johnson was a senior. He spent time at Troy, went to Oregon. At a certain point, there's going to be a lot of questions asking, can he put on weight?
Yeah.
Oh, he doesn't have the weight. Can he put on the weight? Because the NFL team, you best believe, is going to be doing their research into that. It's do we want to draft this guy if we're not confident he can get up to at least 180?
Yeah.
But we'll see. I tend to think he will. I mean, the next guy I'm going to talk about came in 20 pounds less. So sometimes it just happens. But
yeah.
So anyway, you give your next and then I'll give mine.
Yeah, I think the guy that is probably my biggest loser is Jay Higgins out of Iowa. As hyped as he has been, I mean, he's been an all Big Ten linebacker the past 2 years. He did not run well at all. A 4.8 40. His jumps were not impressive. His other times were not impressive. His athleticism score was 27th out of all the linebackers. It was a 55. If you look at the prospect grade, It's candidate for bottom of roster or practice squad. If you told me that was going to be Jay Higgins before the draft, I would have laughed. But his measurables, his combine did not match what I expected at all.
Yeah, I mean, Jake Higgins is an instinctive linebacker who is very smart. Unfortunately, it's not what the NFL is going for in their linebackers, right? They're looking for athletic. They're looking at guys who can send on a blitz to get to the quarterback. They're looking at guys that can hang with a speedy running back, going across the field to make sure he only gets 1 or 2 yards. Like they're looking for all this stuff, and unfortunately, like Jay Higgins isn't it. Like I've seen Iowa fans all over Twitter talking about, we'll just put on the tape and look how instinctive he is and he does all this stuff. I totally agree. But unfortunately, that's just not what the NFL is looking for. Jay Higgins, I think he's a great football player. I just don't think he has what the NFL is looking for. And maybe he can overcome it, but, if you're an Iowa fan, that sucks.
Yep. Yeah.
All right, my last one. And again, maybe I'm a Michigan hater. That is what it is. But Mason Graham. Mason Graham was looked at as a top 5 pick before the combine. And I think that he's got some people questioning if he's even a top 10 pick anymore. I saw some people talking about Abdul Carter might not be a top 5 pick anymore because of some of the quarterbacks and stuff like that. I still think Abdul Carter is one of the most sure things in the draft. So at one of the biggest positions of need. So I think he's a for sure top 5 pick. I don't think he's lost anything. But I do actually believe some of the stuff that's coming out of this is that Mason Graham, could drop out of the top 10. Do I think he will? No. I think he put too much on tape. I think that his height is good, and that's something you can't really mess with. I think teams will, get his weight up and stuff like that, especially with some of the numbers he put out. But I mean, Zach, there's not many defensive linemen that tested worse than Mason Graham did. Weight 296. He dropped 20 pounds than what his listed playing weight was at Michigan.
Yeah.
That's in the 26th percentile. His hands, 9 1/8. That's in the 16th percentile. His arms, 32. That's in the 26th percentile. He did run a 5.140, but we're also talking about Tyleik Williams, who ran at what is that? 35 more pounds, more than 35 pounds. He ran a 4.68. Ariante Ursary at 35 more pounds. He ran a 5. Like Mason Graham at 296. It would be something if he lost the weight and he was still quick. But for whatever reason, that didn't translate to his 40. And I think that's a combination teams aren't going to be too ecstatic about. And then on the bench, he only repped 24 times. Ohio State just signed a freshman coming out of high school that repped 25 on the bench.
Well, and I mean, typically, typically, if you have shorter arms, you should be able to do more reps. So it's surprising.
So I don't know if it was just a bad day for Mason Graham. He's obviously a fantastic player. I mean, you look at everything he did. But I think teams are going to be looking at him more as kind of a pass rush specialist kind of guy, maybe than less of a run defender type of guy, which I don't think is off base. But I mean, he was really good against the run in college. I think teams are just questioning, is that going to translate to the NFL? That run defense that he had. Again, it's like Jay Higgins, right? Phenomenal player in college, great player in college. Does it translate to the NFL? I think Mason Graham would be fine. I'm not saying saying he's not going to be in the league or anything like that. But I do think that this is going to give some teams some pause about whether he should be a top 10 pick or not.
Yeah. I'm kind of surprised actually that he tested at the combine. Because typically you have an idea of how you're going to test, you're training for it. And if he knew that these were going to be his numbers, I'm kind of shocked actually that that's
what leads me to believe it was just a bad day. Maybe he goes to his pro day with Michigan and just completely knocks it out of the park. He's more near his normal weight. He puts up more bench reps. Maybe that happens. Maybe it's just a bad day. And if that happens, he's probably fine. He's probably still a top 10, possibly top 5 pick. Yeah. But after this, he's the number one defensive tackle on the board for a lot of people. Kenneth Grant had a really good day. Derek Harmon had a really good day.
Yep.
Is he still gonna be drafted above those guys? I think so. He should be, I think. But you never know. Teams can fall in love with other players. It just happens.
Yeah. I mean, you still have to look at the film though. And nothing that he did, like, it's different than Jay Higgins, right? Because Jay Higgins tested really poorly.
Yeah.
Mason Graham did not test well compared to what his stock is. But, like,
it was it didn't meet expectations.
It didn't meet expectations. Yeah. That would be the difference. It's still a losing effort. I agree with you wholeheartedly. But I think when you compare Mason Graham to Jay Higgins, I think it's just important to put that context, right? Because Jay Higgins, like, he might go undrafted.
Yeah.
Like someone will probably take a flyer on him because he's a good leader. He has good film.
A locker room guy too. Like, they're going to want that guy in his locker room. Yeah.
Yeah. But we're talking about Mason Graham. We're talking about a number of spots, not potentially falling out of the draft. And Mason Graham's film. I mean, just go back. I don't want to go back and watch the Ohio State game, but for anybody else
wants you to watch, though, that's the game he wants you to watch.
That's not the game I want you to watch. But yeah, Mason Graham wants you to watch that film. But yeah, but I think your point is very valid. Like, it did not meet expectations.
Yeah. And like I said, he can completely change things around at the pro day. He's got that opportunity. Maybe it was just a bad day. But if you take his day today, if that was it, you're going to have, GMs and stuff like that saying, should we take him in the top 10 or should we maybe take him 11th or 12th?
Yeah.
So,
yep.
It is what it is. But all right. Let's get to some comments really fast, Zach, and then we'll get out of here. Philip believes that Pat Bryant is Larry Fitzgerald. I mean,
Larry Fitzgerald is like one of the greatest receivers of all time.
I mean, I think, like, he's not going to have the best numbers. He's not going to have the best measurables, but he's just going to be a reliable receiver for you. I agree. I don't think I don't think Pat Bryant's going to turn into, one of the greatest receivers of all time. Could he? Sure. I guess anybody could. Yeah. But I wouldn't put my money on it. But if you're talking about, like, a guy that maybe doesn't have the most athleticism in the world, maybe isn't going to be, everybody's first choice on their team, but he's just a reliable guy who's going to run good routes for you, be there when your quarterback needs him. Yeah, it's probably going to be Pat Bryant for you.
I don't know. I'm sorry. Larry Fitzgerald is like one of my favorite players of all time. And he was pretty athletic. I mean, he was huge. I don't know. I don't like the comp.
All right.
Part of that, like, Larry Fitzgerald, I just looked it up here. He was 6'2", he was almost 6'3", 225 pounds, ran a 4.48 40, had a vertical jump of 38 inches. I just put some respect on Larry Fitzgerald's name, man. Like, I think Pat Bryant's really good, but it's kind of like how, like, it's like, oh, like, yeah, I think Pat Bryant compares to Calvin Johnson. It's like, it's clearly not that, because Calvin Johnson was, if he played until he retired, like, if he played more, he probably would break every receiving record. But I don't know.
I love that we found this out about you, Zach. You will defend Larry Fitzgerald, until the end, huh?
Well, he's one of the greatest receivers of all time.
He is. I'm just messing with you.
I'm not trying to knock Philip, but I'm just like, it's like if you, I don't know what would be a good comp for Pat Bryant, who's a tall, lanky receiver who runs good routes. That's not Larry Fitzgerald. I don't know. I wouldn't compare. It's like, I'm afraid to compare Jeremiah Smith to Larry Fitzgerald, because as good as Smith is, like, let's let him become a junior before, and that's Jeremiah Smith, who I think we all think is generational. So,
All right. We won't make you defend Larry Fitzgerald anymore. We'll move on.
Thank you. Thank you. I love Pat Bryant. I love Pat Bryant. Just put some respect on Larry Fitzgerald's name, man. Like,
Pitt Snipe Husker says, our lad, like that, lad, Ty Robinson ran a 4.8 in change in the 40, maybe touches the third round. Listen, I said it when we went into the year that Nebraska defensive line was underrated when it came to NFL, combine or NFL draft talk and stuff like that. A lot of people were talking about Polar Bear, Nash Hutchmacher, as being the top rated guy. And I said, you watch out for some of these other guys on that defensive line. Somebody else is going to pop in there. And Pitt Snipe Husker's right. He very well could get up to the third round.
There you go.
We'll see if it happens. But yeah. Philip also says Will Howard's combine. Yikes. He definitely had some bad throws. He definitely. I mean, I don't know if Will Howard should have thrown. If I was Will Howard, I probably wouldn't have thrown.
Yeah.
But, at the same time, Miami fans clip 2 throws and put it on Twitter. Like, that's what Miami fans do because they're so proud of Cam Ward because they think Cam Ward is going to win them games in the NFL. It's like, no, he won't. But, sure. But yeah, it definitely wasn't great for Will Howard. He probably should have just thrown at the pro day, I think.
It was interesting, though, to hear Daniel Jeremiah and Kurt Warner talk about, which is like, I had thought about putting Will Howard as a loser, but then like hearing some of the guys on the NFL Network talk about him, they didn't really penalize him that much for the throws. They said they liked his footwork. They liked how he was throwing the ball. So I think there might be more to it than just he didn't hit his receivers. I don't know. Like, could timing have been an issue between him and the receivers? Sure. And I think that's but it was just interesting. Like, I don't think he had a great day, but it was interesting to hear other people, actual experts, talk about him, and they weren't giving him a hard time like I thought they would.
Howard was a Twitter loser because Miami fans found 2 clips and put them on there.
Yeah.
He was a loser in terms of Twitter. Was he a loser in terms of the combine? I don't think so. Was he a loser? Was he a winner in terms of the combine? I don't think so. He didn't test well in some other areas, the broad jump and stuff like that. Like, I think more people were expecting more athleticism out of Will Howard based off what they saw at Kansas State. And I think that I think Will Howard's athleticism at Kansas State versus what he showed out to be athleticism-wise at Ohio State, which was not terrible. It wasn't Kyle McCord, but it also wasn't anything spectacular, is one of the greatest, reasonings for how different the Big Ten is overall from the Big 12. The Big 12 can say, oh, TCU beat Michigan. Okay, congrats. Iowa State beat Iowa. Okay, congrats. Will Howard ran all over your conference, all over the conference, and he had a really hard time running at Ohio State when he weighed less and he was in the best shape of his life. So, I think that just speaks more about the Big Ten and the Big 12 than anything else, in my opinion. But John says Caleb Johnson ran a 4.57 40 time. Yeah, the Iowa players didn't have a great athletic time, but I don't think anybody expects Iowa players to be the most athletic specimens unless their last name is DeJean. What do you think about that, Zach?
I think Caleb Johnson's one of those backs where I don't know if I expected him to run sub 4.5. And
it would have been nice, right? Like, it would have been good for him, but
it would have been good. But it would have helped him. I don't know if it like severely hurts him because like he's a punishing runner anyway. And like he gets a full head of steam. Yeah, good vision. If he gets a full head of steam, he's still going to outrun most people. It's just, it would have helped him if he ran a 4.4 in the 4.4s. But it's not disastrous.
Well, and when I saw that, it reminded me of runs in, over the season where they caught up to Caleb Johnson,
Yep.
and he maybe didn't have the breakaway speed of a Travion Henderson or something like that. But
Yeah.
he also didn't need that at Iowa because Iowa, was a methodical, move the ball down the field type of offense, and Caleb Johnson was integral in that because you had a really good offensive line and you had a running back with really good vision, right? It's kind of like
Yeah.
Blake Corum a little bit. Now, I don't remember what Blake Corum's 40 time was. I'm not trying to compare their 40 times. I'm just saying, like, back that had a really good offensive line, had really good vision. It was a tough runner,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
um,
Can I highlight a comment here? Just going
sure.
back to Will Howard one last time. Penn State guy. Howard's not going to have overwhelming talent on his side in the NFL. I'm curious because a lot of people they ding Ohio State quarterbacks for this. What was Will Howard like? How much help did Will Howard have with the talent advantage? Because I think that's a common thought, and I he certainly had the best receiver group in college football. Like, I don't think that's a debate. Here, I'll put that back up. But do you think that was the reason why he struggled, or like at the combine? Or because I have a thought but I'd be curious to hear your thought.
I mean, I like the whole wide receiver talent thing to me is a talking point, but I'm not one of those people that says, like, just because you had good talent on your side means that, you're not going to be good in the NFL. Like, I think a lot of people have that correlation. I'm not saying the Penn State guy says that he has that correlation entirely. I think, Penn State guy, you just brought up a talking point here that other people have said. So I'm not talking directly to you. I'm just saying, like, some people will say, oh, well, Will Howard, he's only going to be good because, he only was good because he had good talent around him. And yes, he did. But, like, he still had to find those guys. There's a reason why Will Howard threw to an open receiver over 40% of the time. Will Howard had the highest rate of throwing to wide open receivers in college football. Dylan Gabriel was second. Some people look at that and say, oh, you had a spectacular, wide receiver group, and that was why. You had a spectacular game scheme, and that was why. Yes, that's part of it. But you also can't overestimate being able to read the defense, being able to find that guy when he's going over the middle, having the timing to be able to get the ball to that guy, right? Like, there's other aspects that go into this as well. And I would argue that, again, not saying the Penn State guy is saying this, I'm just saying to the people overall that say this, you would want a quarterback in college that's throwing to NFL wide receivers rather than not. Because he's going to get to the NFL and he's going to be like, oh, wow, these guys are so much faster, Like, I guess the flip side of that is like, oh, these guys are so much bigger, maybe. But as far as I'm concerned, like, you want a guy who is used to throwing to talented players. So it's not so much the talented wide receivers as it is there is a talent advantage that Ohio State has over most teams they play. But then I would also look at Texas. I would look at Notre Dame. Notre Dame was regarded as the best man coverage team in college football. And Will Howard set a record against them.
Yeah.
So again, I know Penn State guy is not saying, it's the only thing. And I'm just saying you bring up a good point, Penn State guy. And I appreciate you bringing it up, Zach, so we could address it.
Yeah. And he, Penn State guy said, I love CJ Stroud. I think the thing is, this is it's the same criticism that was brought up with CJ, which is like, well, CJ was great because he had Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, JSN, Marvin Harrison, Emeka Egbuka. It's like, man, I don't disagree that these quarterbacks have great receiver rooms and that helps. I just think it's a difficult thing because, especially, like, how did they perform in talent equated games is probably the bigger. So you mentioned Texas. Jahdae Barron's going to be maybe a top 10 pick, and he played for that Texas team. Taffy and Makuba was one of the best safety tandems there. They held Jeremiah Smith to 1 catch and 3 yards. So, I mean, they were legit good. And, like, Will Howard had a pretty good game against them. Like, so I think you have to take it all in context. Some of the stats that he put up are certainly, it's like, he torched the the Tennessee corner again, because the Tennessee corners were not great,
Yeah.
right? As much hyped as they were, they're from a lesser conference, so
Yeah. Yeah, and the Penn State guy saying, he says, just means more parity in the NFL you won't have. Said the same thing about Bo Nix at Oregon, and Bo is doing okay. Yeah, I mean, it's a talking point, but it's not the end all be all. Like you said, Bo Nix, same thing. Yeah, and I mean, I don't think anybody's arguing Will Howard's better than CJ Stroud.
No.
CJ Stroud was on another level with his accuracy and everything else, and then when he put mobility into his game with his accuracy, it was all over.
Yeah, listen, comparing Will Howard to CJ Stroud is like comparing Pat Bryant to Larry Fitzgerald.
Okay, all right, we're gonna bring that back up.
We're just not. Sorry, Philip, I love you, man, but yeah, we're not making that comparison.
I like it. All right, the last one that I had starred was Pitt Snipe Husker says, can we all take a moment to laugh at Shiloh Sanders' 40-yard stunt that pretty solidly backfired? I gotta be honest, I did not pay attention to Shiloh Sanders at all. The only thing I saw from any of the Sanders NFL Combine was that Shador Sanders like stuck up for Will Howard, I guess, in a tweet or something like that. Which I guess it's nice of Shador Sanders to do. He also said all his teammates stunk too. So I guess the guy's just vocal about who if he thinks players are good or not. Which more power to him. Just don't think you should probably go to the NFL and say, hey, get rid of my wide receiver 5. He stinks. Don't do that. Not saying he would, but no, I didn't see that. Did you see that, Zach?
I did not. I'll
have to look it up on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. All right, let's see if there's any more comments, and then we'll get out of here. Troy says most number 3 wide receivers in the NFL or number 1 players on their team in college. The talent is just as good. And it's true. I mean, if you're a slot wide receiver in the NFL, you in some places you could play X, right, in college. But then you translate to the NFL and it's just different. So yeah. Yeah. All right. Oh, and John answered it for me earlier. John, thank you. He says 4.53 for Corum. So, well, maybe Caleb Johnson could be different than Corum in the NFL. We'll see. But we'll see. All right, Zach, I think that's all we got for the NFL stuff. Anything else you want to get to before we get out of here?
No, this is great. It's good to be back. And be back on Tuesday. And tomorrow. It's the quote unquote live show, but not live.
Yeah, so we'll do like a premiere or a live or something like that, however YouTube and StreamYard does it. Tomorrow night with Zach and TJ from the Common Fan. And I'll try to be in there in the chat talking with you guys. Zach might be there too if he can make it. But yeah, we'll have that live and everything, and you guys can be in the chat talking about it. And Zach and TJ will give you all the ins and outs of Nebraska this year. So,
well, it's more post-mortem of 2024.
Last year. Sorry.
Yeah, we'll get to. Although we do, I asked TJ at the end. Well, I won't spoil it. I'm not going to spoil it for you guys. It's great.
Yeah. And like Doug always does, he reminds you, hit the like button. We appreciate you, Doug. Yes, please hit the like button before you get out of here. And we'll see you next time. Have a good one, everybody.